how to enable AI in the organization in a safe manner. But before we even go there, let's talk a bit about, is it even worth it? I mean, sometimes things get hyped up. You have generative AI and it's going to change the world. Let's intuitively feel that this is truly worth it or not. So this is McKinsey's view, which says it will actually have up to a $4.4 trillion of impact across industries. Maybe want to raise your hands if you think it is a very high number and it's just hyped. We have some hands here. And anybody who thinks that this is actually a lower side of the estimate and impact is going to be even bigger. So a lot of optimism. And let's talk through why that is. I always start with the why. So I think many of you have seen this curve, with actually, this actually is from economist Robin Hanson. And he observed that humanity and the prosperity or the GDP of the world was flat since the humans came into existence. And then it took off. And then his observation was that this actually has happened primarily for technology. And he kind of put it this way, and it is a very famous kind of slide, and he got very well recognized from it, that since steam engine came and the electricity and the motors and electronics, the computer and the internet, the mobile, the pace of innovation and the prosperity of humans actually have significantly accelerated. Well, what I'm going to share with you is that what happened before it? Why did this happen? And it's a very simple observation. Literally what happened here, you actually have about 3,000 years BC, the alphabet and the language is invented. And then you actually have printing press and people that start exploring multiple global languages, scientific publications, and boom. Essentially what really happened was you have hundreds of millions of brains got connected, not in one lifetime, over generations. People wrote, generated text, and then this whole transformation of humanity in some ways actually happened. Now if you imagine that if you have these generative AI models and LLMs, which are neural nets, if they get connected, and they're eternal, they don't die like humans, essentially, right? What transformation do you think is going to be possible? And if you now think about it, right now it says world GDP is about 100 trillion. The McKinsey estimate, just like many of you think, is highly underrated. I think the impact is going to be significantly more than that. Because fundamental thing is machines never understood human language before. They've conquered in some fashion. Of course, early in the journey, right? But they're cracking the mathematics of human language, and that's very, very powerful. So this seems pretty underrated. Let's talk through it. That I think it's very clear at this point that the data in AI, it'll drive the transformation. And the role that we as cyber professionals or data professionals play is significant. Because industries are going to be completely transformed. Many companies would not exist in the form or will not exist, and new companies will be there who will actually fundamentally use the AI in a fashion to create new value. So either we could be enablers as cyber professionals or blockers, and hopefully some of the discussions we'll have is that we play the role of an enabler inside our organizations. And this is the way most innovation will happen in the companies. On the left, you actually have your proprietary data. Frankly, the unstructured data is perhaps the very first time it's tapped this way. Structured people have been doing for BI and AI. You combine with the most potent generative AI model, and of course create agents on top of it, which is literally automations, even tiny little automations talking to each other, and you have amazing outcomes, from co-pilots to assistants to business process automations to new apps. That's really the way the innovation will happen in most organizations. But the most important part on the left is actually the data. Models are changing all the time. In fact, you want a way that you can swap the models out because power is in your data. And we'll talk through that. What does it mean to enable AI? And this one variable of GenAI literally impacts everything. Why? Because, frankly, it is like a little human brain in there. But the issue, of course, there is that it is a probabilistic function still, right? And that probabilistic function is being used to create knowledge, which is maybe correct, maybe not. Is being used to correct automation, again, goes into probabilistic function, and then autopilots. Determinism is still not there, not been there for quite some time, which means how your resources, any resource, and data gets used with this probabilistic function, and how our data gets generated. And of course, how you interact with the customers, you really need to actually have good visibility and new level of controls around it. And that's basically the entire cybersecurity stack. At every different points, it needs some kind of an upgrade, and certain brand new things have to come into play, which we never did before. So what are those things? In fact, the very first thing is to even understand how much AI is actually there in your organization. Let's give it a name. People have used the word shadow AI, but let's truly is the shadow AI, because it's such fun stuff. Your employees, your developers, everyone, your execs, everyone is trying to use it. Understand automatically not just the agents, not just the models, but what agents, what utilities, what anything that's tied to it, what's going on in the organization. Discover it. Understand. Do you even know what risks are associated with certain AI models? Whether it's bias and toxicity, whether it's maliciousness, understand that, have some kind of a model cards instantly available to you. And how are they configured? Because the way these models are configured will actually make a difference, right? Either they're going to be bad, ugly, or it'll be safe. And models are okay. If you lock them into some place and they're okay, the fundamental issue comes is your data. What do you know about your data? That what data is being used with which model? And is it blessed? Is it safe? Anything sensitive going inside it? And your ability to actually clean this data along the way, such that your internal controls that you've applied, you can actually do something about it, right? And this is on the consumption side. When users are interacting with these AI models, more and more is going to be natural language. And in natural language could be any language, and any language could actually be programming language. So how this interaction is going on, the paradigm shift has happened. It's no more about, I have a firewall, I have a proxy, and I feel good. Well, they don't understand natural language as yet. They need to, right? And the distribution of that control points on the checks have to be deeper into the application, the AI application and system itself, the agents that are going to be running. And then, do you have compliance? And these compliances are a little different. Yes, they're sitting on the shoulders of the existing many of the compliance frameworks, but the new elements that you need to fully understand. So essentially, there are 5 things, 5 steps. First, discover all shadow AI models, agents, utilities, platforms, apps active in the organization, right? And document it, and make it a method that you're always able to discover these things that are going on, because without that, there is nothing. Then have a way to actually assess the risk of these models and agents and everything, and have a way to actually do something about it, right? And of course, as we have seen, when groundswell happens, especially for something as powerful as Cool, a lot of unsanctioned use is going to be there. And you can just block it. You can just really block everything out there. You have to have some method to madness. And then at that point, if you can understand what data is being used with what model and agents, you may decide to shut it down, because you have better understanding at that point in time whether this is safe use of AI or not. Or you may decide at that point that we'll sanction it. We should be the enabler of that AI because it's very beneficial. So you go to the journey of enabling, but with the right guardrails that need to be put in there. And those controls are going to be on the left of the model, like what data comes in, and to the right of the model and agents, how the consumption happens. And then have a way for the sanctioned apps to automate compliance. Because it's going to be asked, from every vendor is going to be asked, if you're using AI, what is that AI, and what's your compliance status? I think it's just already being asked, and it's more going to be very, very pervasive along the way. And if you look at OWASP top 10 for LLMs, one thing you will notice, and I know it's a very busy slide, and there are top 10 of these, one thing you'll notice that it actually is across the entire AI system. It is not just you put a proxy and look at some traffic and you actually have OWASP for top 10, you're covered. No. Actually, literally from the data, from the model understanding to the data, to the consumption of data, to permissioning, to actually the use of that knowledge by the end consumer, it covers everything. Actually, it's very well done. So to match those 5 steps actually matches very, very similar to what OWASP for LLM is done, but one firewall, a simple firewall, even if it's LLM firewall, does not cover OWASP top 10 for LLMs. And we'll go through that a little bit of that. First thing is, of course, to discover. In the cloud environments, you should have a way to be able to automatically understand what models and agents and utilities are actually active. But a lot of AI is going to be in your SaaS apps. And some of the most dangerous use cases is going to be in your SaaS apps. How do you actually know what AI models are active and what data is actually being sent by that SaaS app provider to a third party? Or if they're using the AI internally, how the data is being utilized, I think is extremely important. But that starts with the journey. In fact, I should be saying that the entire top 10 of OWASP for LLM actually starts with this. Because if you don't know the models, if you don't know how to utilize, you cannot do anything about it. The second, of course, thing is understanding the risk. And because there is a fast evolution of GenAI models, we're just at the inception of this journey, right? There has to be some way, if you're trying to do your own pen testing and others, yes, for some system level you can do it, but for the models and known agents, you should have some kind of model cards given, where if you discover a model, you should be able to look at the model card and say, if I'm not modifying, if my team is not modifying these models and just using it through APIs or hosting it in their environments, what are the risks? From toxicity and bias and maliciousness and configuration issues, what are those actually in the environment? And if you look at the OWASP top 10 for LLMs, you'll actually have this map to excessive agency. Are they over-relying on these to actually generate things? It talks about that. It talks about do these actually models have permissioning, that they have excessive permissioning to read and write to things they should not actually have the ability to do so. And of course, knowing that if these models are configured in a way that they cannot be stolen. But this is where the most important part comes, because that's the data. Data is changing all the time in your organization. It is not something you set it up and you're good, your configuration is right, and you move on, and keep checking over a period of time. Data is changing, and that's where the power is. And that's the biggest place, the value is going to be created. It's like a flood of, water that's going to go into these AI models, fully understanding that which file, level of a file, or a table, or an object is being utilized with which AI model, that has to be understood. And if it is, should it be blessed or not? And if you actually have this data be utilized, what kind of issues is going to create? Entitlements have a whole new paradigm here, because now you actually need to know that the entitlements that are there in a system, would they be preserved when they're consumed? What do I mean by that? Let's say you have a file in a SharePoint. You take it out, all of a sudden, that file, you have no understanding of who was supposed to be seeing it. If you take it out to give it to model, why? Because when it's in that app, it actually does all the enforcement of the entitlements to make sure which user group, through which policy should have access to what file. You take that file out and give it to a model. Now there's no entitlement, and if it gets consumed by somebody else, it's a huge problem. So understanding to the level of one object of data is now the need of the time in that fashion. And of course, OWASP kind of talks, a bunch of these things map nicely to it. The biggest thing here, which is new, historically, people have actually used structured data for BI and AI. But at the epicenter of the generative AI, which is something which is brand new, is actually the unstructured data, right? So security of the data to understand there's no model poisoning going on. Entitlements, all the level to the level of a file, not to a system, to a level of file and object, to a table, to a column. You need to actually have an understanding what models are picking what, and ability to control it. Sanitize the data on the fly to know that if it's being consumed by the models, it's clean. It won't break any of the sensitive data, is not going to go to these models. Lineage is important. It's a concept that probably in unstructured data didn't talk about much, but now it is. Why? Because if the file is if somebody's asking a question on a prompt and is being consumed from a file, where did it come from? Or if you're a file, which AI systems is sitting in right now? Because it gets embeddings are created and goes in all these systems. And quality, garbage in, garbage out, bias in, bias out, right? So understanding of quality of unstructured data, which not been done before, and when you curate your data sets for different use cases, you cannot have your finance data to go to customer support, vice versa. How do you curate this thing? This has to be automated. If you don't do this thing right, basically, somebody, of course, people will be in the news and already in the news. Implementation of controls at the ingestion. If data is being used to train or create RAG or something, how is it getting cleaned automatically? And is it actually compliant with your security and privacy constructs? And then firewalls at the consumption side and distributed within the app. And why is it different? Because traditional proxies and firewalls understands IP addresses and URLs, not English language, not code. These firewalls are special. They need to understand intent. They need to understand language. They need to understand any language. And need to understand somebody's trying to do the jailbreak or prompt injection attacks. And this is not in one place in your system. It has to be distributed within your app. Because at the prompt level, if somebody is coming in and asking questions, you need to understand their intent. Why this question? Is it a jailbreak attempt? Is a prompt injection going on? When the response comes through, you need to inspect it to understand there is no exfiltration of the training data that's actually going on. And when you're retrieving from your inside the app, you need to actually understand, at that point, it's not necessarily language. You need to understand how vector DBs work, how the vectors work, how the embeddings work, and where the file came from, what the entitlement was there or not. All those things are not necessarily a traditional proxy or a firewall and needs to be actually in there. And then compliance. We sometimes can overlook, we're all cybersecurity professionals, looks like a check mark, but this can drive or block your company from doing business. So it has to be thought through, how do you automate? At security, what we actually enable, if you try to do this thing in piecemeal fashion and silos, it could be a mess. Because you have to discover, you have to understand data, structured data, unstructured data, entitlements, the laws, the regulations. You actually have to understand the usage. You have to clean the data. You have to mask the data, tokenize it. Instead of doing it in 5 to 10 different tools, it has to be thought through. You need a data command center. Why not? If data is actually the center of all the transformation that's going on, why is it not commanded? Why is this in one place we can go and understand where is your data? What AI models are tied to it? Where is the separate files? And if there is a file, where are the embeddings actually sitting in different AI systems? And are the appropriate controls active? And that concept of a data command center is which we learn from our customers like yourself is something that's done. And the way it gets done is that you build one knowledge graph. And that knowledge graph is actually provide the full context. We call it data command graph around your data, down to the level of a file, down to the level of table, and every possible context around it. Entitlements, regulations, your policies, your users on top of it, and the actions that you can take. And if you actually have that, then you can actually utilize the data and the AI in a much more safe fashion and be the enabler, not just the blocker of the AI. Because in the very first slide we talked about, this is truly transformative. The impact, which McKinsey says $4 trillion, is going to be minuscule. And hopefully in this room, a lot of people will be the fundamental enabler of this big transformation. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.